more and more fans are getting fed up with what they see as the Thunder's overly physical defense, hacking, holding, and hugging their way to stops with barely a whistle. The common refrain that the Pacers could never get away with the same kind of contact, and that it's just not fair. But is that really the case? Are the Pacers tiptoeing around, afraid any contact will draw a foul, while the Thunder are emboldened by a loose whistle? I went frame by frame through the footage to find out what's really happening. A good example is when Pascal Siakam drives on Lou Dort in the second quarter while he is in legal guarding position by being directly in the path of the driver and squared up to him. Dort's left arm reaches in for the ball from behind. It looks provocative, but I gotta tell you, after watching it several times, I'm starting to wonder if he actually makes contact with just the ball. And because Caruso is swooping in and he kicks it back out, the referees decided to leave it alone. And now we get a drive by Siakam where we can see Caruso with the hand on the waist, and then Chet putting a forearm on the other waist while Siakam lays it in without a whistle blowing. On the other side, we have a Chet Holmgren drive into the middle where Turner gets similar contact with the forearm to midsection as he's jumping into the air, and the refs chalk it up to physical playoff basketball, and I agree despite Chet's vociferous protesting. Alex Caruso gets a lot of attention and accusations of constantly fouling, and here's an example as he jumps out to Siakam and reaches in to make contact to Siakam's elbow, dislodging the ball. It's possible the refs didn't call it because Siakam regained control, and on the ensuing play, we see Siakam extending his right arm and Caruso contacting it evenly, all while he maintains good positioning, and so it's a play on. Siakam tries to chase SGA through the handoff, and we can actually see Pascal pulling SGA's left arm down on the reception, with a little contact on his back as well, but it dissipates quickly, and on the ISO move near the elbow, there's a little more contact on the reach in, and let's make one thing clear, reaching in is not a foul. Only when it causes enough contact to create a disadvantage or affects a player's balance does it start to rise to the level of meriting a foul. Caruso was at it again as he picks up early, but watch how Siakam uses his off arm to ward Caruso off, so this looks worse than it is in conjunction with the Siakam head tilt back, and Caruso does a great job to turn and run parallel to the drive. However, we see some contact with the right arm on Siakam's back and a swipe down that makes contact with Siakam's shooting arm without a call when there should have been. That said, Jalen Williams gets similar contact on his drive when Turner starts to run up his back in an attempt to avoid the clear contact, and this directly leads to a turnover instead of what could easily have been called a foul. Plays at the rim can be hard for referees to see perfectly, especially at speed. Chet uses his right arm to apply pressure on Siakam's back while holding up his left arm to signal a clean attempt at a block, but we can see that it causes imbalance and the inability for Siakam to get as high as he wanted to, and as a result of the no call, his layup is short. Meanwhile, Nesmith gives Chet a taste of his own medicine as he utilizes his right arm to the chest to keep Chet from getting higher in the air so Halliburton can contest the release into a miss. The thing you have to be very careful with is to assume guys like Dort are constantly fouling and getting away with being overly rough when they don't have that many possessions where they're even involved in the play. But if you want to get involved in the play, then you must download Kalshi, the first and only legal prediction market in the United States. You can bet or trade on anything, from the Grammys to the Oscars, and you can now do this with sports in all 50 states. I'm going with OKC in Game 3, considering they've had a double-digit lead for a big chunk of the 96 total minutes of the NBA Finals. And if I win, I can turn $10 into 14 and I'm on my way. So, click my special link in the description below and get in on the action for the rest of the finals. The first 500 traders that trade 100 contracts will get a free $10 credit. There are so many markets you can pick, it's fun, it's legal, and with my breakdowns, you'd see that a majority of the time, the Pacers run a play away from Dort so there isn't an opportunity for him to impose his physicality. There might be 10 plays in a game where he's either guarding the ball or a cutter, and I hope you can respect how good he is as a defender. His reputation is well deserved. He almost got beat trying to play the ball screen when Halliburton rejects it, but recovers as Hartenstein helps. Then watch how he jumps to support SGA on the potential Nesmith drive, and finally closes back out to his man before switching on to Nesmith, who pushes him as much as Dort holds, nothing to call here. And then watch how he seems to be faked out of his shoes but turns that into an explosive crossover step to maintain legal guarding position directly in the path. He totally gets the ball cleanly on the reach-in, all while getting into the air to contest the floater into a miss. And let's not mistake contact like this armed to Halliburton's chest as anything but a good defender, letting his man know he's there. There is no impeding of progress, but it can wear on Hallie's mind and make him mentally tired, as he does it again here, letting Hallie know he won't get a free cut to the basket. Turner also gets physical with Dort to get him off, and you can see great exertion to recover after getting faked in the air, with Halliburton clearly concerned about Dort's flyby despite it being completely clean. And all that touching might explain a shot like this, where he doesn't even want to engage another round of footwork, instead jacking up a long three into a brick. There are plays that infuriate opposing fans, like this screen on Dort that looks clean, and I totally understand why people would question this since it doesn't look like it merits a foul. But it wasn't because Dort flopped. Look close enough and you'll see how Turner's foot kicks Dort's foot and trips him. Just like I'm asking you to respect Dort's defensive ability, the same goes for Caruso. While he does reach in, again, it's not a foul unless he gains an advantage. He closes out right on top of Nembhard, but not disrupting his rhythm or balance. Nembhard uses his hip to clear some space, and watch how Caruso continues to stay in his path, square to the ball handler, and then closes for a tight contest into a terrible miss. Look how well he anticipates Siakam's move to cut him off and make him turn his back. No illegal contact whatsoever. And while he cuts him off again, know that Caruso will try and swipe on most drives. But when it's this overt in a downward motion, it's almost always a foul despite his request for a review. What he proves here is that when you swipe upwards, you can get a lot more clean steals. And this guy is as smart as they come on the defensive end. It's possible that this kind of contact could make people feel like Dort is always getting away with hugging, but Nesmith grabs him at the same time and it breaks apart very quickly, so there's no need to make a call here. In contrast, with Caruso jogging to the front court, Siakam impedes his motion for 3 or 4 steps, and at that point, it could lead to a confrontation, as Caruso has to push him off, so the referee needed to make this call to de-escalate, especially with the time and score being what they were. My worry is that fans will see the reaction of players to calls on them and assume they're right and the refs are wrong. Thomas Bryant could have been called for a foul twice before he finally hears the whistle. His reaction is clearly one of disagreement, despite the replay showing him grabbing Hartenstein around the waist very clearly. Ben Mathurin gets very handsy with SGA in the backcourt, clearly pushing him a couple of times. But because it wasn't a disadvantage to SGA's ability to get up the court, they let it go. Just in case you were wondering whether they let defenders breathe on SGA. And we'll get back to him in a second, but now we're in the front court and on a drive where his clear hip-to-hip contact does disrupt balance, rhythm, quickness, and speed. So the refs don't have much choice despite the protest from Mathurin. We could keep showing lots of calls that the Pacers got away with to prove that OKC isn't the only team that doesn't get every foul called on them, but the point of all this is to show that these things tend to even out. For every non-call in favor of Indiana, I could probably match it with one on Oklahoma City. But the other side of this argument is that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander gets more than the benefit of the doubt and seems to get every foul call on every drive. While I recognize there is hyperbole in that lament by a lot of fans, I'll also say that foul calls certainly stand out in people's minds much more than the no calls. And there are plenty of no calls on SGA drives where he's trying to get the ref to give him one, and they more often than not lead to misses from SGA. This looks pretty clear to me that Bryant had his hand in the cookie jar and makes clear contact across SGA's left arm, but the refs don't agree and it rolls out. TJ McConnell uses an old vet trick where his bent right arm leverages force on SGA's waist to make it harder to jump into the air, helping to influence a miss with no whistle to be heard. Nembhard has been allowed to be physical with SGA all series long. Here's an example with both hands pushing as the ball screen comes up near half court and the refs allow it. To prove it wasn't a fluke, here's another kind of blatant shove of SGA where they let it go probably because he managed to stay in the front court by a millimeter. Here's a classic quick pull from SGA on Obi Toppin, who seems to have his right hand in the cookie jar briefly, but the refs do not give him the call on the runner and it's another stop for Indiana. And we saw this in Game 1, where he leans into an airborne defender and might have had a good argument for a call, but the refs don't give it to him. So it's vital that we understand that SGA doesn't always get every call, and the quick pulls happen maybe twice a game. So I don't think it's often enough to bring people to threaten to never watch the game again, considering how often he treats us to incredible displays of skill and dexterity. So I hope this all makes a little more sense that both teams are playing good physical defense and each get their fair share of calls as well as non-calls. While two plays may look almost alike, for personal fouls specifically, refs use the notion of advantage-disadvantage to decide whether to call it. This is how they're able to keep the game moving, since if they treated all contact the same, we'd have 100 fouls called and 5-hour games. So let's enjoy Game 3 for the incredible display of skill these two teams are putting on for us, and put away all the accusations that one team is cheating or ruining the game. Far from it.